Let me ask you a quick question, guys. Have you ever wanted to play God? Hey, it's Callum from Gamer Guide, and today we're going to be talking about games that allow you to become this omnipotent ruler where you get to play God and create civilizations, structures, buildings, creatures, entire species, races, you name it. You get to be the all-seeing, all-knowing being within this virtual world. And there are so many games within this simulation genre that allow you to do this, from The Sims to Civ to Stellaris. There are so many great options of games out there that allow you to do this, but I want to talk about one that's slightly different from the rest, and that is a game called Spore. So if you've never played Spore before, it's a game that follows that premise where you start from nothing and you build until you have this big ball of everything. With Spore, you start as a single cell organism, and your goal is to expand through biology to become this intelligent life form where you can form tribes, you can form civilizations, and all of a sudden you'll be expanding onto new planets and building space programs and various other bits and pieces that come along with becoming this intelligent life force. It's an incredible game. It's something that you may think there isn't a lot of other things that would be quite like that, but this is what I mean when I say that there are so many games that offer this format. If you like Spore, there are games out there that are not exactly the same but offer very similar gameplay. And if you've exhausted yourself when it comes to playing Spore, I want to give you a few examples of games that you can jump over to and have just as much fun. So join me as I give you my top 3 games that are just like Spore. Check it out. So we begin proceedings with a game called Thrive. In terms of games that are very similar to Spore, you will not find anything that is quite as close as Thrive. It's basically a modern day free-to-play version of Spore, and it follows a lot of the same principles almost down to the letter. What you do within Thrive is you create, you guessed it, single cell organisms, and you build them up into these intelligent life forms. But the goal of the game is slightly different in the form of you're not trying to build a civilization to become this all-powerful entity. You're trying to build to survive. It's a survival game where you're ultimately trying to keep going for as long as possible. You will have other intelligent life forms that will come along and try and ruin your day, and ultimately what you're trying to do is build up defense systems and mechanisms so that your intelligent life forms become what the human race is to the planet Earth. We are the majority, we run the place, and that's what you're trying to do within Thrive. It's basically a free-to-play version of what Spore is. And if you've exhausted Spore and just want something that's just a touch different but practically the same, then you need to try out Thrive. Next up, we have the Civ series. So you may think this isn't particularly the same. How does building single cell organisms into intelligent life forms marry together with this game that's very much married together with historical events and empires? Well, let me tell you how they marry together quite nicely. It's in the form of the gameplay. The format is very, very similar in the way that Civ starts you off as this tiny little tribe or civilization, and what you have to do is use relationships with other entities around the world. You have to gather resources, you have to train your tribe to do various different things so that they can expand your borders and take over different places, and then you have to be hostile enough to attack places to take over their land. In some cases you have to build resources that will allow you to gain certain skills like diplomacy, and you'll be able to build trade routes and various other bits and pieces like that. That is Civ in a nutshell. You start with a very small entity and you build in stages until ultimately you have a space program and you're launching into space and you've completed the game, so to speak. Spore is very similar in that you have this very small microbe and you have to expand from that microbe into little life forms, and then you have to give them certain traits and abilities so that they can evolve into these intelligent species, and then you have to give those intelligent species roles and tasks so that they can build into a civilization, and then from a civilization you have to thrive and you have to become this almost human-like entity where you are interacting with technology and you're establishing trade routes, and it's all very similar when you look at it. on paper. The only difference is Civilization is very much engaged with real world politics and history, whereas Spore is quite otherworldly and you'll be encountering aliens and going off into different planets, and it's very much based in biology as opposed to history. But if you're a history buff and you want to find out a little bit more about the Roman Empire or the ancient Egyptians or Britannia or whatever it happens to be, I would give Civilization a try, because I reckon if you're a fan of Spore, you will definitely enjoy that. And then thirdly and finally, we have Katamari Damacy. Now this one might seem like a bit of a weird curveball or a wild card when it comes to the 3 games that I've chosen, but I think it's something that's a little bit different. If you're not looking for something that is very much strategic and turn-based, and you want something that's much more lighthearted, much more action-packed and silly, but also quite lighthearted, and it doesn't take itself too seriously, and you can almost turn your brain off when you play this one, which is something you can't say the same for when it comes to Spore, because there is a lot of tactics and strategy involved. Well, Katamari Damacy, in terms of its format, you start off as this little ball that is like a gravity cluster, and what it does is it grabs everything that you can get close to within the planet. And what the goal of that is, essentially the king has had a little drunken mishap and he's destroyed the moon and the stars and the cosmos, as it tends to happen when you have a drink or two. What you have to do is essentially go around this new planet and pick up as much crap as you can, and whenever you do, you will eventually form your own gravitational pull, and you will create the moon and the stars and the cosmos out of junk. It's very similar to games like Sliverio or Agario or Donut County in a lot of ways, where you're just collecting all the stuff that you can to get a bigger cluster so that you can collect even bigger stuff. It's similar to Spore because you start off very small, and you build and you build and you build until you have this unimaginably large thing that you don't even recognize from the thing you had at the very start. It might be a bit of a loose link between the two, but I think if you're looking for something that's a lot more lighthearted, but you still want to have that link between Spore and the game that you choose, then Katamari Damacy may just be the one for you. So there you have it, guys. They are the 3 games that you should play if you absolutely love Spore. You've got a little bit for everyone there. You've got Thrive, which is incredibly close to Spore. You've got Civ, which is Spore for the history buff, and then you've also got Katamari Damacy, which is the lighthearted and fun, but very loosely based on Spore, if I'm being honest. But it's something for everybody. I hope that this has given you some ideas of what you want to play next, and it's settle your burden of losing Spore after playing it for so long if you're a huge fan. And I hope it gives you something to fill that void. I've been Callum, this is Gamer Guide, and I'll see you guys next time.